in Jesus. As long as you are within, and I told you the word in Jesus means it is a circle. As long as you are within the circle, wherever, at the center or on the periphery, but you are within the circle, there is no condemnation. No condemnation. So he brings this rhetorical device and he asks a question. Who is it that can prosecute the people of God's elect? That's how he asks. Who has enough evidence to present before the court of heaven accusing the elect of God? And the word elect simply means those who have been called out and have received pronouncement of a favor of God upon them. So this is how this question is. Who is it that can lay a charge that is reasonable, that can stand against those upon whom the Lord has called and pronounced a favor? That is the question that Paul is dealing with. Who is it? Now, that is why he then, part 2, he says, is it God who justifies? In other words, who is it who has enough evidence to accuse me? Now, Paul is not saying there is nobody who can accuse. No. Neither is he saying that is there any evidence? There is. For me, if God wanted to judge me today, I would simply freeze and become grass. Probably I will be a grasshopper. You know, I'm a useless person. Nothing good in me. Like Paul would cry, oh, wretched man that I am, who will rescue me from this body of sin? And he says, thanks be to the Lord who has given us his son Jesus, who is able to rescue me. You are equally nothing. The only thing that we are seeing are these clothes. And I was shocked yesterday. A very good pastor friend of mine called Pastor Ogot. Pastor Ogot is a chaplain of Eronge Adventist Primary School, one of the best performing Adventists. He just got involved in a road accident yesterday and passed away. He is dead. And they showed the pictures. The guy is such a bright and robust, healthy young man. You look at him, and I looked at him and I said, God, you can allow this handsome young man to go? What makes you very important is not the job you have, it's not the house you live in, it's not the car you drive, it's not the job you hold or the status. What makes you important is the breath of Jehovah, Amen. The Creator King. That's what makes a difference between you and a cockroach. It's nothing. That's the only difference between you and rocks and this soil here. Paul asks, who is it that can accuse? Who can bring? Who is it that can come with evidence in the court of heaven and lay against those upon whom the Lord has pronounced a favor? That is the question that Paul is asking. But he doesn't end there. In verse 34, he asks this question so that I put them together. He says, who is to condemn? Who is it that qualifies to pass and declare a verdict of guilty against the elect of God, upon whom the Lord has called and said, these are my children? Who is it that can condemn them? Who is it that can punish them, even for the consequences of their sin? Who is it? Aha. Then he asks a question. Is it Christ who died and rose again and is now seated at the right hand of the Father? interceding for them. You know, are you getting how Paul is arguing? Pastor Tuti, are you getting it, man? You know, he's simply saying, if Jesus died for their sins, rose from the dead to confirm that even the power of sin and the power of the grave can no longer hold on them, and is now interceding for them, meaning pleading. He presents his life. It is not blood, you know. Some people say Jesus goes before the Father and he shows his blood. It's not blood. He shed blood. It is life. He says, my Father, here is my life. From day 1 up to day 0, there is nothing, even the devil has nothing against me. This life, I laid it down on behalf of this particular sinner. He is interceding for Kevirigo. He is interceding for Mora. He is interceding for Makhanu. He's interceding for Dagi, interceding for Tinaga, interceding for Pastor Eli, interceding for Elder Osebe. All of this in there. If he is doing it, Paul is asking them, who can be able then to condemn them? Now, the questions that Paul asks, by the way, right from verse 31, they are rhetorical questions, meaning you don't have to give an answer, but that the answer to all those questions stands to be absolutely no way. That's basically what it is, from 31 up to 39. Absolutely no way. Having argued that, then I'll now want to present to us what the gospel says. Are you listening to me? The great central fact is that we are God's chosen ones. Who shall dispute this fact? Even the devil knows this. It all depends on whether we see the reason or not of our election. The great election is declared by the way God has pronounced justification upon all sinners because of their faith in Jesus Christ. This particular justification is not just saying, I have forgiven you. It's an act of God's mercy that is founded upon the mediation of Jesus Christ. It is an act of his justice, whereby the believing sinner is delivered from the curse of the law, from the guilt and power of sin, and is translated into the kingdom of his dear Son. It is passing from death unto life by faith of the operation of God in the sinner. The sinner, once afar off, is now brought near or nigh, is accepted in the beloved, and become one with him. Praise the Lord. Shangaa sana akikuona ukifanya hiyo vitu. Hata yeye mwenyewe hafanyi. Anashtuka. I know one person, Pastor Tinaga, who is able to separate me from the love of God. And that person is myself. Satan cannot. God cannot. Angels cannot. Men and women cannot. Money cannot. Status cannot. Nothing. Sin cannot. Because sin has already been taken away. I am the only one the Lord has remained with to choose whether I should separate from him or remain with him. If I choose to remain, nothing will ever separate me from him. My friend, if this cannot be good news, if this cannot be, then of course, he goes ahead and said, I'm persuaded. I'm persuaded, and I wish I had time to go into it. Pastor Tinaga would have loved to hear, and my pastor is here. But let me simply say, he says, I have a strong and unwavering confidence that neither death, nor the fear of death, nor all the pains and tortures of the dying sins, even the most painful trials of persecution, death in any form, nothing can separate us from the love of God. And I wish we had time to go into Fox's book of Martyrs, where we are introduced to how the apostles of Jesus died. I wish I had time to tell you, my friends, that the apostle Peter died when he was hanging upside down, and yet with this death on the cross, he never ever was separated. We shall have time to tell you about Apostle Andrew, how he died crucified. He was crucified on an X-shape of the cross in Greece. In fact, it is believed that he hung on the cross and was dying, and he called to the crowds and taught them about Jesus and how they might be saved. Thus, he was sharing the gospel until the very time of his death on the X-shape of the cross. He was never separated. Apostle Matthew died impaled and fixed to the earth by spears and then beheaded. Apostle Bartholomew fled to death by a whip, where he was literally torn to shreds. How agonizing that must have been. He was never separated. Apostle Thomas died when he was stabbed by the spear, died from the wound. Apostle Philip died when he was impaled on an iron hook in the ankles and hung upside down to die. Apostle James died when he was beheaded by King Herod near Palestine, and not from where he was as a local missionary to the Jews in Judea. Apostle Jude was crucified in Persia. Apostle Jude died by crucifixion. Apostle Matthias died, was stoned, and then beheaded late in the 1st century. Apostle James the Less died thrown from the pinnacle of the temple and then beaten to death. Apostle Simon died when he was crucified. You see, my friends, no persecution, no death can separate. But you, when you are in your comforts, the vicissitudes of your comforts, you can choose to detach and to separate yourself from the Savior. No wonder Paul says, there is no condemnation and no separation to them that are in Jesus Christ. I'm just thinking of how the words of this song are. Song number 198. It says, and can it be? Who shall separate us? This word separate, in the mind of the Greeks, they have this kind of, mind where you glue two papers together. You take a paper and a paper, you glue them together. There is no mechanical or chemical formula to separate those two papers. Christ has bound to humanity by cords that cannot be broken. He has. And anyone who calls on Jesus faithfully and sincerely, Christ will not allow anything to separate them from him. And he says, are they tribulations? We are going there. Is it famine? Is it nakedness? Is it hunger? Is it because you gave birth and the members did not come to visit with you? Or your uncle died and the members did not come to pray for you? Are those things able to separate? Paul says, nothing can separate. Nothing. In fact, he does not say which, he says who. The assumption here is it must be personalities that have the power. But even when you move from the animate and you go to the inanimate, all of them together, nothing can separate a child of God from his love. You know that love? That love is eternal.